Part 2. Now we've got our foldable set up and we are in chapter 15. We're going to start with life in Russia in the present day. Everything goes on the top half of your foldable. This starts on page 492. The first thing we're going to talk about is how Russia is, half of it is in Europe, the western side is in Europe, and then the eastern part is in Asia. The eastern part, hold on, we'll get it right here. Siberia is what it's called. Siberia is the eastern part of Russia, and it's covered in permafrost. Permafrost, and here's our definition, a layer of permanently frozen ground. So going to our foldable, the first thing that we're going to do is write page 492, Siberia, which is the eastern part of Russia. Is covered in permafrost. And permafrost will underline it, it's important. That's a layer of frozen, permanently frozen ground. And it's under the soil and rocks. So I took 492, soil and forest land, and I wrote Siberia, which is the eastern part of Russia, is covered in permafrost, a layer of permanently frozen ground under the soil and rocks. Next, we'll go to page 493. And it's already talked about the natural resources and how soil and forest land are natural resources, but also minerals and energy, coal, oil, natural gas, and then fishing, Russia's vast coastlines. They have a lot of part of their land that touch the oceans. So on page 493, we're going to write down that Russia's natural resources we've got soil and forest land. We've got minerals and energy. And then fishing is also a very important resource that Russia has. So for forest land, I'm just going to try my best to draw a tree that represents the forest. Minerals and energy, I'll try my best to draw a diamond to represent minerals. And then here's the water, and there's the fish under the water. And I forgot to go back, and we knew that Siberia was permafrost, the permanently frozen, so I'll draw a snowflake right there to remind us that it's really cold in Siberia. All right. Next thing we're going to do is go through onto page 503. And this is called Life in Russia. And one of the things it says is that most people in Russia, the majority of the population, they live in Western Russia. And the two largest cities are Moscow and St. Petersburg. So on 503, we have read that most people live in Western Russia. And that's the European side. And the two biggest cities are Moscow, which is also the capital, or St. Petersburg, which is another very large city on the European side of Russia. Most people live in Western Russia, the European side, in Moscow or St. Petersburg. And the book says it up here, but we know it from up here. It's probably because the eastern part, which is Siberia, is probably too cold to support a lot of people living in a big city because of the permafrost. So most people live on the European side of Russia. Going next to page 505, there's this picture of the Trans-Siberian Railroad. It's a railroad that starts in the capital city of Moscow, and it travels past the Ural Mountains, which is the break between the Europe side and the Asia side. And it goes all the way over to hit Vladivostok, which is a Pacific Ocean side of all this place right here is called Siberia. So we're going to write down, using that picture on page 505, we're going to write down the Trans-Siberian Railway. Oh dear, I just misspelled that. And put this in a box. It's pretty important to know. The Trans-Siberian Railway. Connects two continents. And it's the longest in the world. So I might even go a little bit further and draw myself a train track. And then here's my train. To remind me that even if I lived in Russia, I could get to the Pacific Ocean on the Trans-Siberian Railway. It connects Europe and Asia, and it's the longest in the world. On page 506, this is the last thing that we're going to write. We need to talk about how Russia is very famous for ballet. It's also very famous for music, like Tchaikovsky. There are ballets that are also compositions called Swan Lake, Sleeping Beauty, and the Nutcracker. Russia's very famous for its music and its art. And then most people are, wait, where does it say? Eastern Orthodox. The religion is Eastern Orthodox. Oh, it might be the page before. Here it is. Eastern Orthodox Christianity. So that's the main religion in Russia. We're going to write that down over here. It's going to be a half and half. This is on page 506. And we've got religion. And we've got music and arts. I might even draw myself a music note. The main religion is Eastern Orthodox Christianity. I might draw myself a cross to remind myself that Christianity is a religion based on the life and teachings of Jesus. Oh, and music and arts. They're famous for ballet, like Swan Lake and the Nutcracker. And there's a very famous composer who came from Russia, whose name was Tchaikovsky. So using information from the textbook, now we know that the main religion in Russia is Eastern Orthodox Christianity. And Russia is very famous for their music and their arts, like ballets and famous composers.